Hi friends, welcome to my channel, Life Between Words. My name is Katie. Today I'm here with the very last Advent theme, and that is joy. And what a way to end this little Advent series that I've been doing. I've really loved coming up with book recommendations for every Advent theme. It's been so fun to match books with an idea that encapsulates what Advent is meant to be. Today is Christmas Eve, and I do hope to get this video up today before Christmas because Advent is over tomorrow, folks. So once again, I have 5 book recommendations for you, all having to do with the theme of joy. One of the things that I wanted to address is that joy isn't necessarily happiness. I think that there's an enduring quality to joyfulness that doesn't exist with happiness. You can have joy in the midst of grief, you can have joy in the midst of trials and tribulations, whereas I feel happiness is more dependent on your circumstances. Joyfulness is more dependent on your spirit, what's going on inside of you, no matter what's going on around you. First, I want to talk about Anne of Green Gables. I have mentioned Anne of Green Gables so many times on my channel. I know everyone probably knows that I love this book. But one of the reasons that I love this book is because the character of Anne is so joyful. Yes, she's moody, and yes, she can really hold a grudge. She is not perfect, but she is joyful. She had a hard life before she and Matthew and Marilla found each other. And even after Matthew and Marilla found each other, things weren't perfect. And yet, she always managed to find joy. Joy in her imaginary friends, joy in her books, joy in her surroundings. She was always so much in awe of the natural world. And I just find her character so full of joyfulness. And beyond just the character of Anne, you find so much joy in the story of Anne of Green Gables, whether it's her growing and changing relationship with Matthew and Marilla and how they change and become more joyful because of their love for Anne, or whether it's her friendship with Diana or any of her other friends, her teachers. I think that you can find joy in so many different corners and pockets of this story. Next, I want to talk about one of my other favorite books and a book that I did a read-along of this fall, and that is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. This book follows Francie Nolan and her family, who grew up very poor in the slums of Brooklyn, New York, not at the turn of the 20th century, but in the early 20th century. The Nolan's life is filled with tragedy and hardship, and yet this is an example of a family who is able to find joy in the midst of their hardship. They are able to make do with what they have and not only be thankful, but be joyful. It's an amazing perspective that we are given as readers in this book. There's this beautiful moment at the very end of this book, and it doesn't give anything away because this book is definitely not plot-driven, but there's this really sweet moment between Francie and her brother Neely at the end of this book when things are finally looking up for their family, and they're reflecting on their past, and they're reflecting on the future that their younger sister is going to have because her life will look so much different than theirs. It'll be a lot easier, and this is what they say, and I think this really reflects the joyfulness that you can find in this book. Lori's going to have a mighty easy life, all right. Annie Laurie McShane. She'll never have the hard times we had, will she? No. And she'll never have the fun we had either. Gosh, we did have fun, didn't we, Neely? Yeah. Poor Laurie, said Francie pityingly. So much joy in the midst of so much tragedy and hardship. And that is why I think A Tree Grows in Brooklyn depicts joy so well. In a similar vein, although much more light-hearted than A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, we have I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. I am not sure I've ever mentioned this book on my channel, but I absolutely adore I Capture the Castle. This is a wonderful coming-of-age novel about a family that lives in this ramshackle castle, and just their adventures, and particularly the growing up of one of the daughters in the family, Cassandra Mortmain. Kind of like Anne, Cassandra herself is very tumultuous, and her circumstances, like I said, they're not bleak like Francie Nolan's, but her family is not wealthy, and they don't have much to recommend themselves in the worldly sense, and yet they are a family of richness and depth and joyfulness. And another great example of a joyful story and a life joyfully lived. I think that children capture joyfulness in a way that often eludes adults. And so I couldn't have this list without mentioning a children's book that really captures kind of the joyful innocence of childhood, and that is Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. This is just one of the most beautiful copies of a book that I own. It has a lot of the original illustrations, but look at this cover. So it comes off, and as you can see, there's a cutout. And then look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. This is also a book I've never talked about on my channel, but there is something so sweet and innocent and magical and joyful about the story of a little boy and the life that he brings to his toys. It is wonderful. And finally, I'm going to end with another book that I've never mentioned on my channel, and also a nonfiction book, and that is Bread and Wine by Shauna Nyquist. I would categorize this book as a food memoir. I love food memoirs, and I love books that include recipes. I love books that include the love of food, because one of the things that I think food does, at least life around the table, it brings out the joy of community, the joy of our family, the joy of our friendships, and that is what this book is about. It's about gathering together the people in our lives that we love in our most joyful times and in our times of grief. But even in those times of grief, joy can be found around the table. When I read this 2 years ago now, I loved it. Every time I think about it, it makes me feel joyful. And I will end talking about this book on a quote as well, and that is, I'm going to read it from my computer, so I'm going to look down, I'm sorry. When the table is full, heavy with platters, wine glasses scattered, napkins twisted and crumpled, forks askew, dessert plates scattered with crumbs and icing, candles burning down low, it's in those moments that I feel a deep sense of God's presence and happiness. I feel honored to create a place around my table, a place for laughing and crying, for being seen and heard, for telling stories and creating recipes. I found so much beauty in this book and so much about what it really means to live a joyful life that includes all the messiness. And that's one of the things I love about Shauna Nyquist. I have not read any of her other books, although I want to, and I know that they include finding joy in the imperfectness of our lives. I so appreciate this book because of that. And so this book really needed a spot on this list of joyful books. So with that, I hope that you are all having a joyful holiday season. And if you celebrate Christmas, I hope that your Christmas is filled with joy, even if it is not filled with happiness. And I will talk to you next week, I'm sure. Bye. Christmas always makes me think about the things that I am really grateful for, and the things that I hope for, and the things that I love in my life. And one of the things that I'm really grateful for this year is BookTube, and the friendships that I've made, and the community that I've found. It's been so wonderful. And so with that, I'm going to leave you. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas.